Mm.
Okay, good morning, everyone. This is Audrey Russo, and I am thrilled to be here this morning. Thanks to our partners at CGI and Comcast Business. We are kicking off virtual CIO Insights, and I'm pretty thrilled to have Dawn Cappelli with us, Vice President of Global Security and Chief Information Security Officer at Rockwell International. Thank you, Dawn, for waking up and being with us. This is a topic that is pretty important considering the world that we're in right now, even more so. A few weeks ago, we had Scott Brady on from the Attorney General's office who actually gave us a lot of insight, but I think that your presence as being a practitioner and seeing what's happening around the globe is pretty exciting for us. So with no hesitation, I would like to introduce Dawn Cappelli, and she is going to share with us what's happening in her world as much as she can, and hopefully we'll have an opportunity for some questions and answers. So I want to thank Monica for pulling this together. Monica Takas is on our team, and she's overseeing all things that are related to cybersecurity, information technology, manufacturing, and automation, which includes robotics. So this is just one of our beginning of the New World series, and I'm thrilled. And also, feel free to ask questions, and if it's appropriate during times of Dawn's presentation, I will facilitate some of those questions that are at the bottom of your screen in the chat. So thank you everyone for being here. Happy Tuesday on this 9th week of being somewhat shelter in place. Hopefully everyone's safe and sound. And Dawn, thank you so much for being with us this morning. Really appreciate you taking the time and being a champion for not just innovation, but also women in leadership. And we don't have enough of us that are around the table. So it's very exciting to have some intimacy of a chat with you. Really appreciate your time because I'm sure this is a really intense time for your world. So Dawn, take it away.
Thank you, Audrey. I am so happy to be here. This is really a great opportunity. One correction, it's Rockwell Automation. That's okay. We used to be Rockwell International, and we were headquartered in Pittsburgh many years ago.
Okay, so it dates. I'm sorry. I just got dated.
Yeah, it's funny, like some people still think of us that way. So thank you for having me here. I'm very excited to be here. You know, it's funny, I haven't met a lot of the people in the Pittsburgh security community because Rockwell Automation is headquartered in Milwaukee.
Right.
And I'm in Milwaukee a lot. I travel a lot to Milwaukee. And so actually it's kind of nice with the coronavirus. I have been in Pittsburgh for months now.
Isn't that great?
It is. So I'm excited. Thank you for giving me this opportunity to actually connect with the Pittsburgh community.
It's great. And hopefully it'll be the beginning.
Right.
Yes.
And I would really like it to be interactive. You know, it's early in the morning. We're having our first cup of coffee. Right. So please enter questions into the chat as I go, and I'll just stop periodically and ask Audrey if we have any questions.
Absolutely.
Okay. And I don't know if they can unmute and ask them, or
yes, they can.
Okay, great.
I'll work on the back end with the team.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. So I'm going to talk about insider risk primarily today. And I'll talk about insider risk, but with minor changes for COVID-19. So if you have an insider risk program, it will work during COVID-19, but I think we have to think about some things differently. So first, just a little bit about my background. I've lived in Pittsburgh my entire life. In fact, I live in the same community I grew up in. I started out my career as a software engineer programming nuclear power plants for Westinghouse, then went to Carnegie Mellon University and the Software Engineering Institute still as a developer. And in 2001, I became interested in security and where better to go than CERT at Carnegie Mellon. So I went there. And then in 2013, I went to Rockwell. So when I was at CERT, my area of expertise was insider threat. Just kind of happened into that area. And I ended up being the founder and director of the CERT Insider Threat Center, did research for 13 years on actual insider threat cases, almost 1,000 of them, and ended up writing a book. And then Rockwell came along and they gave me an offer I couldn't refuse, which was to start up an insider risk program. At that point in time, very few companies had formal insider risk or insider threat programs. In finance, they did, and in the defense sector. But aside from that, it wasn't really it wasn't a thing. And so I am happy to say that our program has been seen as a best practice. And so I would love to share with you what we've done. So I did that in 2013, and then I became the VP of Global Security and CISO in 2016, but the Insider Risk Program still reports to me. So what I'd like to do in this time that we have this morning is talk about what are insider risks, how can they be mitigated in general, and what needs to be done differently due to COVID-19. So let's start out with some real cases. So this one came from ZDNet, a vengeful IT admin thrown behind bars for destroying the company's systems on exit. And another one from Reuters, a CEO emailed his staff saying that an unnamed employee had conducted extensive and damaging sabotage to the company's operations, including allegedly making unspecified code changes to its manufacturing operating system. And I deliberately do black out the company names. So those brown weird boxes are on purpose. So what do these cases have in common? Well, if you look at them, they're very technical employees. So we have an IT admin in the first case, and in the second case, this employee obviously had the access and the ability to sabotage the company's manufacturing operating system and to impact their operations. So we call this insider cyber sabotage. Let's talk about who does this. Well, you can tell from the pictures, nice, happy people don't do this, obviously. It's angry people that do this. And as I said on the previous slide, they're technical people. Now, in my work at CERT, I worked with psychologists from the government, and they studied these cases with us. And they basically said, these people that most people will not cross that ethical line and actually try to cause harm. They might get really angry, but they're not going to cross that line and take action to cause harm. The people that will have what they call personal predispositions. So these are people that don't get along well with people. They don't take criticism well. You kind of have to walk on eggshells around them. They think they're above the rules. We all work with people like that, right? And they can work in their company for years, their whole career, and never do anything, never commit sabotage. But if the right things happen, they might. So what tends to happen is something goes wrong at work. And think about things going wrong at work right now. We have almost all of our employees working from home. And a lot of people are starting to have a hard time with that, especially in Pittsburgh, where, we're at the tail end of people being released from their homes. So something goes wrong at work, and typically it's you don't get the raise you expected, you don't get the bonus or no bonus. Well, think about what people are going through right now with COVID-19. A lot of companies have pay cuts, they have furloughs, they've had a reduction in force. There are a lot of things that could be the precipitating event that could prompt someone who has those personal predispositions to get really angry. So what happens in these cases is something happens at work, they get really angry. And by the way, under normal circumstances, I want to make sure I tell you that getting a new boss is one that sets people off, as well as just being put on a project they don't like. So something happens at work, they get really angry. And if you think about the kinds of things that I talked about as those precipitating events, if those happen, chances are everybody's upset. If right now, if your company has furloughed people, has laid people off, has had pay cuts, I'm sure you have people working from home, then there are a lot of people who are maybe just having a hard time with that right now. But most people, they get angry and then they get over it. They feel like, oh, well, we're just going to have to deal with this. These people that have the personal predispositions, they can't get over it. So instead of just getting on with it, they get worse and worse until they end up on the HR radar. And at that point, I got to interview 3 of these people, convicted felons, in my work at CERT, which is pretty interesting, let me tell you. And what they said was, I knew I was going to get fired or I was going to quit, and I knew I wanted revenge. And so these are technical people, remember. They take steps to set up their attack, but typically they don't carry it out until after they've left. So they do things like set up a back door, or create a logic bomb or a time bomb, or insert malicious code into the company's product. So think about whether, if that would happen to your company, what would the impact be? So what can we do about that? Well, first of all, you need to identify what are the roles in your company that could do something like that. And who are the people in those roles? So for instance, your privileged access users in IT, your developers of your products or of your customer-facing websites and systems. So identify who the people are. Secondly, take steps to implement controls so that they cannot sabotage your system. So for instance, separation of duties. Don't let one person have the ability to create an account on their own. Make sure that you have separation of duties. Have code reviews of any changes made to your products or to your source code so that someone else has to do a code review and hopefully can detect if something malicious was put in there. Now, detect is a really interesting one. When I was in CERT, we used to say that detect really relied on detection of those human behaviors that I described. And so let's talk about that first. So if you remember, I said that these people end up on the HR radar. So they get bad enough that the manager contacts HR and says, look, I need your help. We need to do something about this person. This can't go on anymore. To us at Rockwell, that was the key. We are in over 100 different countries. And so there is no way for us to train managers in over 100 countries on insider risk. People change positions too often. But HR is consistent, and we have human resources all around the globe. So what we did was we trained our human resources staff so that they all understand insider risk. Anyone new into HR has to take mandatory insider risk training as soon as they take their role. And every year, the entire HR department has to take annual refresher training. So there are eyes and ears around the globe, and they recognize when they see someone who fits that behavioral pattern that I described. At that point, they contact the insider risk team to respond. And by the way, I forgot to mention that identify, protect, detect, respond, recover is the NIST cybersecurity framework. I've found it very effective in so many parts of our security program. So I like to use that to kind of frame what you need to think about when you're creating a program. So before I talk about respond, let's stay with detect and now talk about the detection of technical indicators. Technology has just gotten so good that now we can detect when someone is doing something that might not be legitimate behavior. So in our company, our insider risk program and our CCERT work hand in hand. So when our incident response team sees some behavior that might be an insider threat, they hand it over to the insider risk team. So for example, if they see someone downloading a hacking tool, that might be legitimate. They might be a pen tester of our products, or they might be a pen tester in our IT security department. On the other hand, it might not be legitimate. It might be someone who is intending to do something malicious. So they refer that to the insider risk program for investigation. And likewise, when they find someone who's trying to use Tor or who's trying to use some kind or access something on the internet or download something that can be used for malicious purposes. Okay, so now we get to respond. So the insider risk team, in responding to potential sabotage, it's very tricky. First of all, if it's based on behaviors, social behaviors, you can't just jump in and start investigating a person because they're angry at work. That's just not, in many countries, it's not legal. So you have to work very carefully with your lawyers and have a process worked out so that when you have a case like that, you can get legal approval, get HR, get the manager, get everyone involved, and make sure that you have sufficient reason to investigate the person. And remember, we're not talking about somebody who's having a bad day or they're crabby for a while because they're working from home. We're talking about extreme concerning behaviors. Now, on the technical side, if we see someone downloading a hacking tool, for instance, again, we go to HR and the manager and we talk to them and find out, does this look legitimate? So the response is really a technical investigation of their online behavior if you have sufficient reason and legal approval. And then recover, you don't want to recover from, you don't want to have to recover from insider cyber sabotage. You really want to get it in the first 4. If you have to recover, it's basically, you have to be able to recover from any kind of attack that might happen on your system because these are very technical people and they can cause a lot of damage. So before I go on, Audrey, do we have any questions? I don't know how you want to handle that. Do we want people to just kind of unmute and ask?
I was muted because my dogs were being demanding. So yes, we have a question here from John Sieg. So let's unmute him. He has a question, and then I believe Adam Polasek has a question as well. So let's start taking some of those. So we're going to start with John.
Hi, Don. Thanks for being here.
You're welcome.
My question is, do some of the new tools that are available, the ones that do behavior analysis, are they helpful in your process for identifying?
I'm going to talk about those when we talk about theft of intellectual property. I've found them to be effective for theft of IP, for detecting potential sabotage, and we have detected potential sabotage at Rockwell Automation. So I can say this does work, this process that I'm outlining. But like the UEBA tools, I'll talk about for theft of IP. That's where I find them to be most effective. But they are headed the direction where they also will, they're pulling together the kind of information, the kind of activities that will be effective in potentially identifying sabotage as well.
Okay, one other, just a related question is, how have you found with the working from home, were your systems all set up to handle the amount of people now working from home compared to before?
No, and I'm going to get to that. So I'm going to go through sabotage, theft of IP, and then the impact of COVID-19 on all of this. So no, I don't think any, well, I shouldn't say I don't think any companies were, but most companies were not equipped to suddenly have thousands of people working from home. So yeah, that definitely has an impact on all of this.
Very good, thank you.
So Adam, you want to unmute Adam Polisek?
Sure. Thanks so much for taking the time to speak with all of us. My question is, there's an anecdote recently of a services firm called Cognizant, and the news kind of caught that they effectively exposed themselves to $50 to $70 million in losses through a ransomware scheme. I'm just curious, sort of what you're thinking through and brainstorming now about how do you budget for cybersecurity these days, either the human engineering or the tooling side? Like, how do you think about ensuring or kind of leveraging against these potential losses? Just, is there any kind of just like, high level bullets that you're thinking through, kind of how you're shaping, because those dollars are so significant that no one could have contemplated, that level of liability, I think, or maybe you have a better point of view.
Oh no, you're absolutely right. And ransomware is hitting everyone. What's really annoying is that they're hitting health related organizations right now. What we do is I use, and this is sort of getting off track of insider risk, but it's a really good question. We use the NIST cybersecurity framework, and we walk through it every single year, and we calculate what are our scores in every subcategory. And we also look at where should we be. So every company's different, and your risk tolerance is different. So you need to really figure out, where do we need to be? How good do we need to be? And then we put together a roadmap in 2016 when I became CISO for how we were going to get there. Now, we've had to change throughout the years because things have changed. Ransomware didn't exist in 2016. Now it does. And because of ransomware, people are focusing a lot more on that recover than they ever did before. Because before, recover, okay, somebody might steal a database or somebody might bring down a system. But until ransomware started hitting, we didn't have to think about, can we recover everything? And if we have to recover everything, what order, where do we start? Because you only have so many people that can start recovering. So what's the order that you have to work in? So I'm a huge advocate of using the NIST CSF. And over the years since 2016, its use has definitely escalated. So I recommend just using that and really look at every single thing. Mm-hmm. I do want to say one more thing, which is we're seeing our supply chain being hit with ransomware. So small and medium businesses, unfortunately, they are not immune. And so I think one of my new passion areas is supply chain security. Somehow we as a community have to figure out, how can we help small and medium businesses to be able to defend themselves against that kind of an attack?
So thank you. We also have a question from Tom Frey. If you want to mute Tom. Tom, are you there?
He joined by phone.
Okay, well, if he's not there, I'd like to jump to Naisha. Naisha has a question.
And then Audrey, after this one, I think I'll go on and then I'll stop again after that.
Okay, awesome. Yeah. Naisha.
Thank you so much, Audrey, for that, and Don for being here. Talking about risk tolerance, the segregation of duties and controls are incredibly helpful. However, you can overdo it very easily. What is Rockwell's risk tolerance towards the implementation of these type of controls, double checks, segregation of duties, especially now in the virtual environment?
So Rockwell Automation, I guess I probably should have described who we are and what we do. We create industrial control systems. And so our equipment is in every critical infrastructure there is, except maybe finance. So I like to describe it, if you're riding a roller coaster and you're hurtling down towards the earth, it's our equipment that knows when to put on the brakes and when to speed up. So if our products were hacked, imagine what a malicious actor could do if they changed that formula so the brakes didn't come on when you're shooting down towards the earth. Likewise, we're in chemical companies, pharmaceutical companies. We have the formulas for those chemicals and for those drugs in our equipment. So if they could be hacked, that IP could be stolen. And we're in water and waste, and we're in power. So I need to set the stage, because when you talk about risk tolerance, I see our position, if we could be compromised or our products could be compromised, that would enable any of our customers around the globe to be compromised.
Mhm.
And so I take that very seriously, which is why I went to Rockwell. I felt like this is a really important place to be. So our risk tolerance, we don't have a very high tolerance for risk when it comes to the potential of our products or our network being compromised. So we take security very seriously. But that doesn't mean that every company out there has to think about those kinds of things. So you need to think about your crown jewels and what is it that you need to protect. From our perspective, we have to protect everything. We have to protect our network so that it can't be used to get to our products.
Good. All right. Well, great questions. So now let's pass the baton back to you in terms of your presentation. Thank you for that.
Okay. So let's go back and look at some other headlines. So in this one, a company sues their top exec who allegedly took confidential files when he left to join another company. In this one, an insider walks trade secrets worth $1 billion out the door on his way to China. And back to that Reuters case again, in addition to what the person did, he or she also sent what the email said was sensitive data to unnamed third parties. So this is insider theft of intellectual property. And now I need you to forget everything that I said temporarily about insider cyber sabotage, because insider theft of IP is totally different. I mean, look at that guy. Does he look mad? No. He is leaving the company. And that's what we know about theft of IP. Remember, this is based on almost 1,000 cases that I not investigated, but researched in CERT, and now the CERT Insider Threat Center, which by the way is now the National Insider Threat Center right here in Pittsburgh. I'm happy to say they're still studying them, and they've studied thousands. But what we found was 85% of the people who steal IP do it as they're leaving the company. And the other 15%, they still do it as they're leaving the company. They just start earlier. So if you can look back 30 to 90 days before someone resigned or before someone is terminated, you're going to catch people who are taking your IP. And these are not angry people. These can be great people. They can be very ambitious people. They can be very likable people. Anyone, and I can attest to this, can try to take your IP. What I will say is most of the time, it's not malicious. It's not a spy who is trying to steal your stuff to take to China or to take to a competitor. It's usually someone who's just, they're a good employee. They want to back up their information so they don't lose it. We had a guy who every single week he copied all of his work onto an external hard drive. And as he was leaving the company, we had to get that hard drive back because we don't know where he's going to go next. And he has a lot of our intellectual property on that hard drive. That was back before we had a UEBA tool, so we only were looking at people when they were leaving. We're going to get into.
You never responded.
Oh, somebody is not muted. But a UEBA tool will enable you to detect the minute that somebody backs up for the first time, and you can let them know, hey, that's not how you back up. We need to get that drive. We need to get our information off of there. And now you've headed it off at the pass. But let's get into the whole mitigation strategy. So what can you do using the NIST CSF? Well, first of all, you need to identify what is your critical information. What are your crown jewels? What do you really care about? And who has access to it? From the protect perspective, access controls. And don't just put access controls in place and then just forget about them. You need to have a recertification process for that critical information because people move around the company. When I came into Rockwell, there were people that had been there, and people tend to stay at Rockwell for a long time. And we had people that had been there for 25 years, and they had accumulated an amazing amount of access. Now we have a recertification process every 6 months. And so we make sure that anyone with access to restricted information has to be recertified. And think about, so these people, they tend to not do tricky things. They're basically using USB drives, moving information to cloud, or emailing it out. So they're using easy methods because they can. So think about that. Does everyone in your company need to have access to USB drives? Do your employees need to be able to move data to any cloud sites out there, or can you restrict them to only your authorized cloud providers? Also, back to those USB drives, you don't have to just open it up to your entire company. You can restrict it and then only enable USB writing access for people that have an exception. Now, detect. So someone asked about UEBA tools, user and entity behavior analytics. So if you don't have a UEBA tool and you're trying to figure out, do we need one? Look at some people that have left your company in the last 30 to 90 days. Get their USB activity, their cloud activity, their email activity. Look at it, people who have had access to your critical information, and see what you find. Chances are you're going to find someone pretty quickly that you wish you had looked at before they left the company. If you have a UEBA tool, it pulls together all of that activity into one place. We also get termination data. So if someone's leaving the company, that's a big factor in their risk score. These UEBA tools will calculate a risk score for every single person in the company based on that activity, based on these risk models that you create. So every day, our analysts just come in, pull it up, start at the top with the highest risk users in the entire company, and they start looking through their activity to find out if there's anything, if they're copying pictures, personal pictures, no big deal. If they're taking IP, that is a big deal. Then we kick into respond. For respond, we always work with HR and with the manager, because we have a lot of employees that have reasons that they need to copy information to USB drives. They need to put information in unauthorized cloud sites because our customer uses a different cloud provider than we do, and so they get an exception. The other great thing about the UEBA tools is they build anomaly detection into those algorithms. So if we have an engineer that goes out to customer sites and he copies information onto a hard drive all the time to take to his customer, it's not going to look anomalous. If he now has a termination date set in our HR system, boom, his risk score goes up. So that's respond. And recover, I'm not going to talk about exactly how we go about recovering the information. If you want to talk about that offline, you can contact me. But I'm not going to publicly say how we recover because, you know, that's kind of something we don't want to publicly announce. I'm going to get into coronavirus and how that impacts all of this next. But let's see, how are we doing on time? Let's take a few minutes for some more questions, Audrey.
Okay. Okay, we don't have any yet. We're good.
Okay.
Yeah, we're good.
All right. So if you do, please let Audrey know. And now we'll go to what needs to be done differently due to COVID-19. So you need to remember that you need to mitigate both intentional and unintentional insider risks. Cyber sabotage is always intentional, let's face it. But someone asked the question about ransomware. And ransomware is typically going to take advantage of an unwitting employee that lets them into your network. So that's an unintentional insider risk. So I'm going to include that in this slide because during COVID-19, we really have to think about that. We have to think about the unintentional insider risk because everyone's sitting at home and we all need to think about what security controls have we had to relax because of COVID-19. So first of all, think about employees at increased risk. As I said before, there might be financial impacts in your company. They're at home, no matter what, they are at home. They have cabin fever. They might be trying to homeschool their kids while they're working. I'm not telling you anything new. We all know that our employees are not in the optimal environment right now. Although I must say, I'm really happy to be in Pittsburgh, so I'm kind of enjoying it. But it's this is the identify piece. But how can you identify employees at increased risk? You need to be reaching out. Rockwell has made a huge push on every manager in our company to say, you have got to reach out. You've got to be contacting your employees. You have to be talking to them. Turn on the cameras if your network can handle it. Turn on the cameras when you're in a Skype or a Teams or a Zoom meeting. Look at each other. Have that human contact. Because that's the only way that you're going to know if you have an employee that's really not taking this well, or that may really just be getting tired of it and may be looking for another job.
Mm-hmm.
So reaching out, that human contact is really important. Secondly, think about the technical opportunities at home. Did you have to let people start using personal devices at home? A lot of companies have people that they went into the office every day. They had a computer sitting on their desk. Now they're working from home. Well, they can't really work without a computer, and they don't have a company-issued laptop that they can take home. So more companies are letting their employees use personal devices. You really need to think about that. Who are they? The people who have access to your critical IP, you really need to think about those personal devices. If you don't have a formal BYOD program with formal BYOD controls, then you are putting your information at risk, both unintentional and intentional insider risks. And think about the relaxed technical controls. Identify what they are, and then you can protect against them. But first, you need to identify what they are. As far as protection goes, security awareness is huge. We have been, since we have this big push to reach out, touch people, we've been doing that with security awareness as well. We've held webinars on how to work securely from home so that our employees know how to resist phishing, that phishing attempts are up. We've seen a huge uptick in phishing emails in the past 2 weeks. They've been targeting our executives, but they just changed and they started targeting more employees besides just the execs. So phishing is definitely on an uptick. And what we're seeing with phishing is it's not the usual infected attachment or a link to a malicious site. What we're seeing now is the phishing attacks tend to have a link to a Microsoft login page. It looks just like your typical O365 login, but it's not. It's intended to steal your credentials, which leads us down to multi-factor authentication. I heard the CISO of Microsoft say 2 times at the RSA conference that of all of their customers that own MFA, that pay for MFA, only 2% have implemented it. And I can tell you as a CISO, MFA enables me to sleep better at night, because even if someone does enter their credentials onto that phishing page, we have MFA, so those credentials aren't going to do them any good. So that's another one of my passion soapboxes is if you don't have MFA implemented, you should implement it. So security awareness, phishing, home Wi-Fi. If you look at the Wi-Fi in your neighborhood, it's kind of sad when you see somebody that uses their last name as like Smith's Wi-Fi, Smith's house. So make your employees aware. Look and see what your Wi-Fi is named. Think about the password for your Wi-Fi. Chances are your kids have given it to their friends. You've given it to your friends. You've given it out to people in the past. So this is a good time to change your password. And then physical security. We are about to enter the yellow phase here in Pittsburgh. And so people are going to start going out again. And so people need to think about, you have that laptop sitting in your home now. You have perhaps intellectual property sitting there on your desk, papers. So you need to think about security at your home. VPN, a lot of companies, they couldn't handle having all of their employees work from home on VPN. So if you, sorry, if you're one of those companies that has loosened up your VPN requirements, think about, does it have to be all or nothing? Can you require VPN access for your critical information? And everyone else can just work off VPN, especially if you're using something like Office 365. So give that a lot of thought. That VPN does offer you valuable protection. So if you can't accommodate your whole workforce at home, which you probably can't, then think about still requiring it for the people that have access to the critical information. And then patching. If your patching deployment requires people to be on your network, to be VPN'd in, are you really patching all of your computers now? If not, then you need to think about that. How can we use an alternative method to patch computers, even if it's telling people to do it themselves? And finally, again, I talked about personal devices already. I talked about employees with access to critical IP. Think about your privileged access users. Can you require VPN for them? And third-party access. A lot of us use contractors, and a lot of those contractors, they don't have company-issued laptops. They come into the office and they sit at a desk. Well, now that they're working from home, what are they using to access your information? Are they using their company's computers? Are they using their personal computers? Because you might want to think about what intellectual property is now being put onto your contractors' computers. I think I'll stop there and see, Audrey, do we have?
Yeah, we have a question from Lou Carmelengo, who owns a company called 5 Star Development. And originally I talked about just women in tech. Thank you for that. Can you speak to, he's asking, can you speak to what Rockwell Automation is doing to recruit and develop a diverse team across all demographics?
Oh, yes, we take diversity very seriously. We actually have won awards for our diversity and inclusion program. We have a program that, I'm trying to think of what it's called now, White Men as Diversity Partners. Every director, VP, and senior VP of the company has to go through this workshop. And it's very intense. If anyone wants to contact me for information about it, I can send you additional information.
That would be great.
It's an off-site workshop where I can say when I went through it, it was unbelievably eye-opening. It really just opens your eyes. It was shocking to me hear how some of our employees, executives, how they are treated, how they need to raise their kids thinking differently because of their race or their ethnicity, because of their sexual orientation. So it's a really great program. And so then it comes from the top down that everyone in our leadership team really lives, breathes, and believes in that diversity message.
That's terrific. And you yourself are quite a role model. I didn't realize your entire pedigree in terms of, you know, your carefully matriculated career.
Oh, it wasn't careful though. I just kind of fell into things. I tell people that all the time. Like, how did you build your career path to being a CISO? How did you decide how to get there? And I said, they didn't even have CISOs when I was young. But, you know, I tell people all the time, don't be afraid to take an opportunity when it is put in front of you, like the Rockwell opportunity.
Right.
Looking for a job, but when I had that opportunity, I just couldn't resist. And the same thing going to CERT. You just, you know, go with your heart. And when you have an opportunity that looks intriguing, take the risk.
So now that you're in Pittsburgh, even though you're probably in your home right now, and you'll probably be in Pittsburgh for a little while longer, do you know what the anticipated period is for work from home and work remotely at Rockwell?
Yes, because I not only am the CISO, but I also have global security reporting to me.
Mm-hmm.
So the pandemic team is run by our director of global security who reports to me. So I'm very intimately involved in that. And we're going to take it slow because well, we're a manufacturing company and we all hear the news about manufacturing companies and plants and what happens if one person gets infected. You don't want to have to shut down your plant. And so we've first of all taken the first measures that we did was looked at those plants and how can we do social distancing? How can we get PPEs for all of the people that are working in there? Very strict quarantine measures around the globe if anyone is suspected or comes into contact with someone with COVID-19. But as far as our office workforce, we don't want to go through the same thing there. You know, if you have one person come in, they can infect an entire team or force that entire team to be quarantined. And we don't want to take a chance on that. So we'll be taking it slow.
So many of our memberships that represent tech and innovation, as well as the services related to tech and innovation, would love to be engaged with Rockwell Automation because, you know, there are so many different things that are happening. You know, when you were at CMU, and just imagine fast forward all these years later, the amount of innovation. I mean, COVID or no COVID, we are, you know, moving ahead. How can we get them more connected to the work that you lead and the team How can we do that without, being so random about it?
Well, I think we can work on that. The great thing about COVID-19, I think, is as a society, businesses have realized people don't really have to be sitting in a room together.
Right.
We have the collaboration technology. And, it's funny, we've used Skype and Teams for years, but nobody ever used their cameras. And
Right.
now when I go into a meeting, I immediately turn on that camera because you feel
Right.
you're in a room with people. You can see their faces.
Mm-hmm.
So personally, and my boss, I'm already in the last phase of return to office. And so I intend to spend most of my time in Pittsburgh now. So I would love to connect with all of you.
Okay, that would be
I
great.
do have a hard stop
It's
at
great.
9:30, so I'm thinking, how about if I go through, the other ones are quicker.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
So we already talked about, you need to detect those concerning behaviors. Also look for unauthorized or pirated software for home use. People are at home now. Their kids and the whole family is fighting over those television sets because nobody can go anywhere and you only have so many TVs. And people in your household are competing for the internet bandwidth. They're playing games, they're doing homeschooling, they're streaming movies. And so we're seeing a lot of people, not a lot, but we have seen people who, they want to stream movies on their Rockwell device. Well, that's okay if you're using your home bandwidth. But not pirated movies. Last year, was it last year when the Game of Thrones finale was out? We put out messages to all of our employees. It's a known fact that hackers are planting malware in pirated copies of the Game of Thrones finale. So do not download any pirated copy. You never can download pirated
Right.
stuff. It's illegal. But we put a special warning out. And sure enough, Friday night, of course, it's always Friday night when people do these things, someone downloads a pirated copy of the Game of Thrones finale, and it had a Russian advanced persistent threat in it. Now, thank goodness our endpoint tool detected it and stopped it from doing anything. But that's a call that really makes your heart race when you get that phone call that we have a Russian APT on one of our employees' computers, and it's because they downloaded that pirated. So, people are playing games on their company computers, and a lot of online games come with malware. So look for those kinds of things. Those people that you are concerned about having access to critical IP, think about, do you have DLP on their computer so that you can see if they're moving IP off of their endpoint onto a personal computer or onto a printer? And anomaly detection, as much as I said before how great it is, it might not work now because our behavior is anomalous. This is not normal.
Right.
It could be the new normal for some people, but anomaly detection might not work. And if we go down to that second bullet under respond, remember that anomalies might not be anomalous anymore. So when you see something and say, oh my gosh, that person never did that before, they must be looking for a new job. They must be quitting. They're stealing our stuff. Maybe not. Maybe they, people, we've found with the unintentional insider risk that people really want to do their job and they want to do it as effectively and efficiently as they can. And they don't know all of the security rules like we do if we're security practitioners.
Right.
Respond, make sure that you work with managers and HR to respond to concerning behaviors. And you need to think about how to recover IP when your employees are at home. So you can't tell them, you can't catch them by surprise. If you have someone that you really think might be intentionally stealing IP, they're at home. So how are you going to make sure that you get that IP back or that they delete everything that they took? For instance, share your screen with us, and we will watch you delete the information. We'll watch you plug in that external hard drive, and we'll watch you delete all of the IP from it. So you need to think about that. And so that is it. And I really, unfortunately, do need to go because
No, totally great. I can't thank you enough. We'll follow up with you in terms of some of the ways to connect and
That'd be
keep you
great.
engaged. I think that would be great. Thank you for your leadership. Thank you for putting this material together. And look for us to stay connected with you after this, Dawn. Stay safe. Thanks for sharing it. And thanks for everyone for joining us this morning. And stay tuned for more that we are doing in the future. And have a great day if I don't Zoom with you at some point during the day today. So thanks, Dawn.
Thank you.
And thanks, CGI. And thank you to Comcast Business.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Oops.